Welcome, welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this session today, which is Helping Kids Cope During the Pandemic, 7 Practical SEL Strategies for Parents. So when we talk about SEL, it stands for Social Emotional Learning. So that will be the framework used to discuss the strategies today, and I hope you have at least one takeaway by the end of the presentation. If you have questions or comments, you can put them in the chat box, and I'll make sure to leave time at the end to answer anything that you may want further information on. So just a little background on myself. I'm a parent, first and foremost, of a first grader and a 10-month-old who just started walking a few days ago. So I'm right there with you as a mother, experienced the highs and lows of this pandemic. I'm also a school psychologist. I currently serve 2 elementary schools in Wake County here in North Carolina. I previously worked in Miami-Dade Public Schools and Green Dot Public Charter Schools in LA County. So at the core of what I do is advocating for youth, especially our Black youth, to excel. So with that in mind, let's look at some numbers. So there are about 1.3 billion children and students that have been affected by school closures, and this is worldwide. Save the Children did surveys of over 6,000 children and parents, and this is in the United States, Germany, Finland, Spain, and the UK. And up to 65% of children reported struggling with boredom and feelings of isolation. Now, even before the onset of the pandemic, our children's mental health was a top priority. So with the times we're in now, it's even more of a reason to, support and do what we can. The first thing that I would suggest as a strategy is to talk to your kids. They know about the coronavirus because it's on the news, everyone's talking about it, or your child's teacher may have, informed them about safety and hygiene at school. But hearing it from all those sources is not nearly as important as hearing it from you. So the first thing as parents, we should do is really explore our own feelings and make sure that we have accurate information, because kids take cues from the adults. And if you're anxious or uncertain, they pick up on that. But if you are composed and you have a positive outlook, then they will too. So when talking to your child, we want to make sure we're having those age-appropriate conversations. So for our little ones, that 2 to 5-year-old range, really think about routines and providing reassurance to help them cope and let them know that there's a plan and that you as the adult are really there to keep them safe. Once the kids get into elementary school, it is harder to protect them from what they hear. So it helps us to find out really what they know. And so using those open-ended questions such as, what did you hear about the coronavirus at school today? And then you can correct any false information and reinforce some of those safety practices. And with the older kids, they are just naturally going to have a lot more exposure to all kinds of information, from social media to their friends. So you can actually directly talk to them about their specific concerns and their thoughts about everything. Help them look at credible news sources or like the CDC website versus, your teen ending up on some fake news website reading about bats and bleach, so we really have to model that good behavior as parents and really be aware not to just leave the TV on all day long, because it's important to be informed, but not to obsess with information. So personally with my son, when we were wanting to talk to him about the coronavirus and reinforce these safety hygiene practices, we used the germ experiment. We saw it online. We initially did it with pepper, but I ran across this experiment done with glitter, which was, took it a step further because it mimics the spread of germs a lot easier. But essentially you get a bowl of water, you sprinkle some glitter or pepper or whatever you have on top, and then you place some liquid soap on your child's finger. They dip it into the water, and then the soap breaks the surface tension of the water, and it makes the glitter or the pepper bounce away. So it really shows the power of soap to fight germs, and then you can practice hand washing, but really fun, easy, hands-on activity that gave a more concrete look at what we were explaining to our son. The second strategy would be to maintain social connections. For our younger kids, they have a lack of that structured socializing from school or sports activities. And it can lead to boredom, sadness, or misbehaviors at home. And then our teens really sometimes struggle with that isolation from their friend groups, and being disconnected can add to stress. So as parents, we can help them maintain those family, peer, and social connections because it can be a protective factor against things like depression. Ways we can help is to take some unconventional approaches. So there's always video chats, for things like birthdays or play dates or social distancing outdoors. But your child may need that support and encouragement to make that shift a reality. So, if we're thinking outside the box for creative ideas, you can think about writing a letter or decorating a card with your child to deliver to someone, or set up virtual story time before bed with grandparents. If you can also think about maybe making a shared playlist, and you can have a dance party virtually. We've all seen some of those drive-by birthday and graduation parades, and in our neighborhood, someone actually created kind of a chalk walk where someone started the picture and then we could just add, and it grew and grew. So, thinking about those things can really help our kids to maintain some of those connections in different ways. And as we think about these connections, especially virtually, we know screen time is already controversial, in the parenting world. But I was surprised to know that video chatting is actually about 80% as effective as in-person contact. So we can embrace technology, but really using it in a more purposeful way. The next strategy is a flexible daily schedule. So if you're like me at the start of this pandemic shutdown, there was more free time to relax, lay on the couch, binge watch a few shows. But then, reality set in when we realized that this isn't just going away in a few months, and we have to adjust to this new norm. So when we find ourselves at home for extended periods of time, it's important to build those structures and routine within the home. So everyone in the household can really benefit from having a schedule, especially children. And just like adults, they feel more confident and secure when their daily activities are familiar and predictable. It helps them to feel a little more in control of their environment. They know what's happening now, what's going to come next. They can learn a new activity or a chore, and it helps them to better engage in learning. So when making a schedule, let's talk about a few tips going in. Create a schedule that is going to work for the kid as well as the parent, especially if you are working from home. Consider scheduling larger time blocks for routines, like you have your morning routine or breakfast, your afternoon lunch routine, and then your your evening dinner routine. Or you can make the day into more manageable short chunks of maybe 30-minute blocks. Remember to incorporate quiet time. At least 10 to 15 minutes will give everyone time to sometimes decompress. You can, help your child with more independent play through, activities like coloring, Legos, blocks, reading, or even taking a nap. If you do incorporate screen time, try to use it more as a tool or a motivator. There's been days where I've looked at my son and I'm like, he's been on that iPad way too long. But the days that I'm more intentional about how to use it makes the day go much smoother. Incorporate exercise or movement breaks for fresh air or sunlight. And at the end of it, just be flexible. It's more about flow. So if you fall out of your schedule, don't worry about it. Just reset and try again. Make adjustments really when you need to. The next strategy is incorporating feel-good foods. So we know the infamous quarantine 15, which is that reference to gaining weight during the pandemic, but it can also reflect that emotional eating due to boredom and stress. And children may react by reaching for those sugary or fatty snacks like the chips and the Oreos. So as parents, we can set the tone to be more intentional about maintaining healthy eating habits, especially during COVID, because there is a connection between what we eat and then how we think, act, and feel. So, foods with complex carbohydrates like beans, oatmeals, fruits like apples, strawberries, and pears are likely to have a more relaxing effect on the body and reduce stress. Foods like bananas, leafy green vegetables, and lean proteins may give more pleasant feelings because they stimulate the release of the dopamine or that happy hormone, So really try to have alternative snack options that are easily within reach. So, keep that bowl of fruit visible, maybe cut up some fruits and have a little fruit plate that they can easily grab. And when we're talking about kids and food, we really want to ensure not to perpetuate any body fears or diet culture on kids, but to really approach it from a more holistic perspective for their overall health. When researching this area, I ran across the SMILES trial, and it was really the first of its kind to investigate the questions, if I improve my diet, will my mood improve? So the results were very impressive. This was done in Australia, and they showed that participants in the dietary intervention group had a much greater reduction in their depressive symptoms over time, which was a 3-month period, compared to 8% of those in the social support group. So I think this study could really reinforce that possibility of adding people like dietitians or nutritionists to mental health care teams in the future. The next strategy, number 5, would be to practice mindful moments with your kids. So you are being mindful whenever you bring awareness to where you are directly experiencing through your senses or your state of mind through your thoughts and emotions. I know there's been some, previous sessions about mindfulness. And there's growing research actually showing that when you train your brain to be mindful, you're actually remodeling the physical structure of your brain. So mindfulness is great for kids, and it can really help to improve their ability to pay attention, to calm down, and to make better decisions. So in short, it's helping with that emotional regulation and that cognitive focus. It's a quality that every human being already possesses. You just have to learn how to access it. So here are a few fun ways that parents can practice mindful moments with your child at home. The first one is blow bubbles slow-mo style. So you have your bubbles, you want to take a deep breath in through the nose, and then your child is going to slowly blow their breath out to fill the bubble as large as it can get until it pops. And that mindfulness is focusing and centering the breath. The second one is an oldie but a goodie, and this is finding shapes in the sky. So you lay down together, you're relaxing, you're choosing different objects, to search for in the clouds. And this helps to be mindful about your visual processing. And then the third one is to tune into the body and get down on your child's level to feel each other's heartbeats. So that is really honing in on that body awareness and being mindful through that connection. Now, number 6, this strategy is the power of touch, right? So just as a disclaimer, this strategy, is going to be for those really within your social bubble or your quarantine. But as human beings, we're wired for touch. And, there's been a lot of articles out during this time about touch deprivation. But when a child is born, that's how, they bond with their mother through that skin-to-skin contact. When we hug or when we feel a friendly touch on our skin, our brains release oxytocin, which is that cuddle hormone, and helping to really increase those feel-good sensations of trust and bonding. So, COVID does mean social distancing, but if everyone in the home is generally healthy, not exhibiting symptoms, in many cases, it's okay to hug and cuddle your kids, and they actually need it now more than ever. Just remember to continue those hygiene practices with the frequent hand washing, sanitizing, not sharing food, drinks, or utensils. And speaking of hugs, I think this quote reflects the power of touch and the impact that it can have. So it says, we need 4 hugs a day for survival. we need 8 hugs a day for maintenance, and we need 12 hugs a day for growth. Now, if you're not a frequent hugger, then consider making the hugs that you do give last a bit longer. So if you aim for a 20-second hug, it actually allows your thoughts to wind down. It decreases those stress hormones, and we actually feel the presence of that human being in front of us a lot more. So when that person is your child, it makes it even more special. Number 7 is to seek a mental health professional. Most children are resilient and they will manage well with the support of parents and family members. Then other children, however, may have risk factors for more intense reactions, including like severe anxiety, depression, or suicidal thoughts. So risk factors can also be pre-existing mental health needs, prior traumatic experiences, family instability, or losing a loved one. So parents and caregivers should consider contacting a professional if they know or see their child exhibiting significant changes in behavior over time. Things to look out for, some signs would be increase in bedwetting, very clingy to the parents, major disturbances in their sleep or their eating habits, withdrawal from school or school avoidance, and then conflicts or delinquent behaviors. Now, if you're in the position and you need to find someone, just know that most practicing therapists have kind of moved away from seeing patients in person, to prevent the spread of COVID, and they've shifted to treating patients remotely. And so there have been some pros and cons to the shift. You have more flexibility sometimes for the client, and the therapist can sometimes get a deeper look into the child's home setting and their world. And then on the other hand, it could be difficult to maintain privacy and pick up on some nonverbal cues in a session. But if you're, seeking some support, you can always go through your insurance if you have it, or referrals through your child's school, because you might end up, talking to someone like me or a school counselor. There's also the Loveland Foundation, which my best friend recommended as a resource, and it focuses on Black women and girls. And they have a therapy fund that you can actually apply for, which provides a limited amount of vouchers to help support actually paying for therapy. And then check out the websites Therapy for Black Girls and Therapy for Black Men, and those sites have resources that can help you find a Black therapist as well. So just to recap, 7 strategies: talk to your kids, maintain those social connections, incorporate a flexible daily schedule, eat those feel-good foods, practice mindful moments, remember the power of touch, and then seek a mental health professional if needed. Okay, so that wraps up my session. I open the floor to any questions. Let's see what I have. So if you feel your child is depressed, what is the best way to get them help without making them feel self-conscious? I think approaching that conversation with your child does have to be done in a gentle way. But I tend to speak on kind of the child's level. And I talk to them in regards to saying, well, I understand that you may be having difficulties, maybe getting out of your room or talking to your friends. And I'm noticing, it could help if we talk to someone who can help you, with your feelings and emotions. And that person, is a counselor or a therapist. And let them know that they're not in it alone, and that you as the parent are there to help facilitate that connection with them. And it could be need to happen over multiple conversations so that they feel and understand that this is a safe option for them to kind of go into. It can be a little scary, but usually once you get past that introductory session with a therapist, children really come around and understand that it's something that, can be useful. Let's see, if my child is not doing well in the virtual environment, but it is the only option in our area, what are some ways we can help them engage, specifically with school and content? So one of the things I've done, because I'm still working through the pandemic, and I've had kindergarten students, I've had parents of kindergartners really struggle with. I had one little one I talked to, and his mom had prepared him so much for in-person school, and he was so excited about meeting new friends, walking to the classroom and meeting his teacher, that when that plan was no longer in place, he had such a difficult time shifting. And so I did virtual sessions with him. I was able to go through things called social stories, and it helped him to shift and understand that school is going to be done in a different way for a while, and he was more comfortable. And then he connected with another adult or another, trusting person at school that made him feel a bit more comfortable. I did 2 more sessions with him afterwards, and just stayed in contact with the mom. One of the things, and that is just for like the younger kid and younger kindergarten student with transition, but even with my own child, he has days where it's up and down, where his focus is on it, and other days where he's distracted and fidgeting, and I will get a message sometimes from the teacher. So I have to reset. And I actually changed his learning environment from the sunroom to the kitchen table so that I could keep an eye on him more. And I set up one of the learning boards so that he can kind of keep his focus in one space versus, looking around out the window or at TV and other things that are outside of his classroom at the time. And always, keep in contact with the teacher. I think teachers can be flexible with how work is presented, how work is turned in, giving a little grace so that assignments can be turned in and still get credit. So I know a lot of places are not being as firm with grades as in the past because of the disruption. This is not normal on any level. And I would also say I've had some parents who their kids have had a little more anxiety with like evaluations, testing, or unit tests. And especially for things that are like standardized state tests, I've had some parents opt out of it because they are, evaluating your child or giving you a score, but it's not reflective of all of the transition and the disruption that they've experienced. So, consider whether you want your child to kind of stay on that, core assessments and all of that stuff, or if you want to opt for them to not have that additional stress. Let's see, do you think that there will be long-term effects on our children from the pandemic, and how do we address those? So I actually did a little research on that, and I found an article that was talking about the effects of Hurricane Katrina and how we can learn from how schools and how institutions worked with students after that in relation to what we're experiencing now in COVID. And what they found was that kids were resilient. They did recover the learning, but it did take time. So when they were moving back into the schools, instead of having expectations of them doing like core grade level work, they focused on skill sets that they had to loop back around and reintroduce. So it was a different approach, but it did take them time to realize like they had to focus on the social and emotional piece, which is a lot of what we talked about today, because you had a lot of kids coming back to school with trauma, and then they're expected to engage in academic learning. So just know that kids, they will recover, they will bounce back, even if you're noticing there's gaps here and there. They do tend to build those skills back up over time. Do you have information on the effects of pandemic on newborns and toddlers? I've been hearing about babies being overstimulated due to the lack of socializing and expression. How can new parents deal with this? I have not had as much information on that. And being a new mom, I am definitely going to look into that information because I want to know. And the funny thing is my daughter, we had a few relatives come, 2 relatives, one of her aunts and then a niece. And her reaction when she saw new people was a little bit shocking, and I have to realize like, wow, she hasn't been socialized as much as when my son, he's 6 years old. And so I'm going to look into that. Thank you for that question, because now that's sparked interest for me. Thank you for joining this session. I know there is a session starting at 4:30. So make sure to join that session this afternoon. And the panel is on systemic oppression and the history of student advocacy. So I'll be there, and I hope to see you there too.